Talking about the future in English can be a challenge because, unlike the present or the past, the future is an indeterminate time which hasn't occurred yet. We end up focusing more on how certain we are that something will happen when we choose which verb to use when talking about the future. Most of the time, you will express yourself in future simple tense. Future simple is made up of two verbs. You can choose to use will or be going to. Will is made up of the modal verb will, to which we add the base form of the verb. Remember that we do not add to at the end of the modal verb will. There is no auxiliary verb necessary for will for negatives and questions. For be going to, we would conjugate the be verb and add going to and the base verb at the end. Be, of course, is the auxiliary verb already for this verb. There is no big difference in meaning between using will or be going to. They both signify that some future event will occur, so we can use them for plans, promises, or predictions about the future. We will spend, or we are going to spend, a few days studying this topic. However, will is used more in formal situations, especially in writing, while be going to is used a lot more in speaking. May I start my presentation? Thank you. I'm going to talk about the consumption of plastic today. One point is that students sometimes use will too much, especially in more informal situations where people would choose to use going to. However, even if you do that, you will not be grammatically wrong. The last point for future simple is that will is sometimes used more for decisions, especially at the moment of speaking. When will the hardware be installed? Oh, I'll install it next Thursday. Typical time expressions that we would use for simple future include tomorrow morning, tomorrow afternoon, tomorrow evening, tonight, next plus time, this plus time, in plus duration, in the short term, in the long term, as soon as, after, etc. When we are dealing with more certainty, we turn to other verbs. For example, for a scheduled event on a calendar, which will occur with almost 100% certainty, we use the present simple. The flight leaves at 10 a.m. Time expressions are very important here because we want to differentiate it from present simple. Also, because we usually use simple present with a schedule in the future, we would combine this with specific times, days, and dates. For a plan which is 80 to 90% certain, we sometimes use the present continuous as an alternative to will. Our office is hosting a conference in October. Again, we will use a time expression to differentiate it from the present. This week, next week, etc. Future progressive or future continuous is formed by using will plus be plus verb ing. Will is naturally the auxiliary verb here for negatives and questions. Like all progressive tenses, only active verbs and not stative verbs can be used with future progressive. Future progressive is used to emphasize what will be happening at a specific time in the future. 2 new assistants will be joining our team in October. And of course, when you describe a future activity that will already be in progress at a specific time in the future, we must use the progressive form. When you get to the office, I'll be working on the upgrades. From this, we can see that the time expressions used will be similar to other progressive verbs. When, while, by the time, as well as specific times in the future, at 10, in 2 months, etc. Moving on to future perfect and future perfect progressive. Future perfect uses will plus have plus the past participle. Will is the auxiliary verb for negatives and questions. Future perfect progressive, on the other hand, uses will plus have plus been plus the present participle. Again, remember that only action verbs and not stative verbs need to be used with this verb tense. These are probably the least used verb tenses of the English language because it's not as common to talk about events that will happen before a specific time in the future. It is much more common to establish timelines in the past when speaking. Still, it's useful to know that future perfect and future perfect progressive are used to say that something will happen or be achieved before a specific time in the future. By the time the new term starts, they will have finished construction on the new wing of the building. The future perfect is used for the first action, while the second action is in simple present. Naturally, future perfect progressive will be a longer action or refer to the idea that the action will be in progress at a specific future time. By next year, you will have been working at this company for 5 years. Like most perfect verbs, some of the time expressions that we will use involve by the time, by plus time, and when. For is particularly useful for future perfect progressive. And that's it. The future tenses may be more fluid because of the nature of the time frame you are talking about, but it is simplified because you don't have to be as specific as the past or present tenses. Thanks for listening.